Appreciate it. Yeah.
Hey, this is Sportsslaw with Lomas Brown, the pro.
And Deb Schneider, I'm the prof. And together, we're the pro and the prof. So we're back with Sportsslaw. I've got to say this. This is our 20th episode, our 20th numbered episode.
Man.
So congratulations to us.
Thank you. Hey, number 20. Wow,
Number
they
20.
are stacking up, aren't they? And I'm stacking up fast too.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. 20 episodes. And, there's, again, a lot to talk about. I mean, when we started this, I didn't think we were going to just talk about COVID and being sick, but it seems to be what we talk about.
I mean, that's ruling everything. If you think about it, COVID is ruling everything that happens in the world today. I mean, even with people's attitudes, Deb, it's just affecting everything about us. And it's been some trying months that we've been under, and hopefully it doesn't seem that way, but I'm hopeful that we're starting to maybe try to come out of this, but it just doesn't seem that way right now.
I don't know. It just seems like everything's coming down. Those people who were doing very well are starting to say, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm ready to move on. And, so it's just such I don't know. It's difficult. And we're seeing it in sports now where everybody's excited to get going. And then we're pulling back. And, I've heard a lot of things. I guess today, let's talk about women in sports.
Yeah. I mean, it's been big. I mean, Deb, the push. I mean, I think especially, if we talk the NFL, with the women that have been hired in the NFL, it's really refreshing to see that, especially a league like the NFL where it's quote unquote a macho league, and it's for us big, strong, tough guys. And women can't handle the physicality and just handle just the nature of football. Yet and still, you see the women that are put in these positions, they're striving there. They're getting off. And I just think it's because they come at you from a different perspective. They look at things totally different than, say, the male counterpart coach that you're used to having. And believe me, with us ball players, when you're out there on the field, you're like a machine. They want you to work and respond like a machine. But guys have feelings. And I just think from the standpoint, I
got to stop you. Guys have feelings?
Yes, we do, Deb. Even us big, strong guys, we have feelings too. So I just think female coaches, I just think they get it. They can be strong just like the men coaches can, but they also have that women's intuition, and they know they could tell certain things. They're able to dissect things that I think men would totally go over our heads, if it wasn't for women.
Well, we're starting to see women in coaches, and going to the NFL is, I think, an absolutely great thing. Because football, of all the sports, if women play baseball, they play baseball and softball, they play basketball, they play hockey, but football is a sport that you really don't see a lot of women. You don't see a lot of opportunity for women. We've had powder puff football way back when. We've got things. So when you're talking about coaching a game that you've never played, how does that play in?
Well, I mean, you have a lot of coaches that have coaching that are coaching now that have never played the game of football. And I'm saying, when I say that, on a professional level, you have some guys never played in college, but yet and still they're able to adapt to the game. They're able to put their own stamp on the game. And that's what I think it takes. Coaching isn't about X's and O's. It's about the characters. It's about the guys that you have in that room. It's about taking those guys, being able to know the psyche of those guys, dissect those guys, put them in the position to where they can utilize their skills and be the best they can be. That's the job of a coach, to put you in the best position so you can have success. And I think coaches have to not only be able to do that from a play standpoint, putting guys in the position, but also, like I'm saying, from a mental standpoint. Because believe it or not, I would say 70, maybe, yeah, probably, I would say probably 60, 70% of the game of football is mental, is your mental approach to the game. Yes, it is a physical game, but there's so much mental to the game of football that you have to take into account. So I do think, like I say, the women coaches, to me, they understand it, they get it. And like I say, with that women's intuition, I just think it's something, almost an advantage for a women coach compared to a men coach.
Wow, that's interesting. I love to hear that. And I truly believe that women can study the game as much as men can study the game and understand the X's and the O's and that kind of thing. Have you ever had a woman coach, woman football coach?
I've never had one. I really never had one. Not even on the assistant level. I'm trying to think, even quality control. And I played the game. I was in the league from 1985 to 2002. And you thought, that might have happened. But no, I never got an opportunity to play for a woman coach, and wouldn't have mind doing that again. Because, again, I'm always the type of person that I want to learn as much as I can. And there's always, if you get it from different voices, you get different opinions from people, then you could take it and form your own. So, I've always I'm very curious as to how a woman coach is in a locker room setting, in a classroom setting with some of these players.
Yeah, that would be a fascinating thing to see. But you're saying you played professionally from 85 to 2002. So you've got 18 years. The first woman, I was looking it up, doing a little research. The first woman coach in the NFL was hired as an intern in 2015 in Tampa Bay. 2015.
Yeah. Wow.
And
no, go ahead, Deb.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, and you were looking up how many women coaches there are in the NFL now.
Yeah, right. 7 full-time assistant coaches and women coaches in the NFL. And I'm sorry, not all of them are assistant coaches. I think 2 are full-time assistant coaches. But you're right. Just looking at the numbers, I'm so sorry it took that long to get our first woman coach in there, 2015. But I mean, it's sad, but there's so many battles. Let's put it on parallel to Black Lives and the protests that we've been seeing. It's been so many battles that women have been fighting, especially breaking into certain fields, like the sports field. I just go back and I reflect back to when they started allowing women reporters to come into the locker room.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one. That was early huge, 70s. That was huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a big thing.
Some of the players did not like that.
Yes, Debs. A lot of the guys didn't like that. A lot of guys felt that it was invasion of their privacy. A lot of guys felt that women shouldn't have been in that space that they were in, and then you had a lot of guys that tried to scare them out of there,
Oh, yeah, there are lots about that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So women have been fighting uphill for a long time, breaking into some of these quote unquote men type of industries where it's supposed to be male dominant in these industries. And you're right, they've had to be strong. I'm just imagining, I can't think of her name, the reporter, but I think she was a New England reporter for the
Katie Lutke, I think her name was.
Yeah,
yes.
There you go.
Yep.
Yes.
It's a case we talk about in Sportsslaw all the time.
Yes. Trailblazer. She was a trailblazer to be able to do that. So, but now if you look at it now, Deb, you're seeing more women involved in the front office. Can we, if you look right here where we are with the Alliance, Martha Martha Ford Firestone stepping down, and her daughter, not her son,
Her
but
daughter
her daughter, Sheila. Yes, Sheila taking over, Sheila Hamp taking over the team. And that just lets you know, and you just kind of see how things are progressing and how things are moving towards equality, not only for people of color, but for women too.
Well, it's nice to see, and you know, when you start looking at everything historically, just from the female standpoint, I want to get into Title IX, because that was passed in 1972. Until that time, women didn't have a chance to participate in sports really at all. Here we have a question from the coaching perspective on athletes. What are some of the challenges in coaching different genders? Who responds better to coaching? So I'm going to let you answer that one.
Well, again, you know,
and then we'll get back into Title IX.
Yeah. I just think some of the typical things are just the separation between male and female. The coaches being able to actually come in female coaches being able to come in the locker rooms at certain times, because you got guys in there changing and whatnot,
right,
being able to do certain things. Other than that, I mean, I don't see a big difference. I mean, heck, I've heard from some people that have been coached by women, hey man, that they can spit some venom just as good as some men can.
Oh yeah, I'm
even
sure.
better.
We've got that figured out.
Yes. So
yeah.
I just don't see, again, I could see from the standpoint of creativity, a woman looking at it differently than a male coach, looking at a play maybe differently from a male coach, looking at a solution differently than a male coach would look at it. And then the other thing, Deb, that can't be mistaken, I'm telling you, the motherly factor that goes into it. I'm telling you, us big guys, we have emotions. We wear our feelings on our shoulders, Deb. We need that tender love and care. And if you could give a kind word every now and then, oh, that's going to boost your morale up more than, you know, being dumped on. So mothers, the motherly nature, knowing that, like I said earlier, having that sixth sense where they know something's wrong and knowing the right things to say to a player, I think those things could be advantageous to a player.
Yeah, well, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Isn't it? Yeah, you know, great book. So, so many things going on. Let me get to Title IX, and then we'll get back to the coaching and the women in sports and all of that. So, Title IX is passed in 1972. And Title IX has nothing to do with sports. I mean, I'm going to read it to you real quickly. No person in the U.S. shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Did you hear the word sports in that?
No, I sure didn't. I
did. I heard Title IX. And we have taken that and turned it into, in a lot of ways, a sports statute for most of its existence.
Right.
And now it's in, you know, a sexual harassment, sexual violence statute. So we're really looking at Title IX as a lot of different, very many facets in Title IX. But I want to submit that Title IX is why we have, well, so many women lawyers, so many women doctors, because we didn't have the opportunity before the 70s. And now so many women coaches are coming up. I mean, it's taken a long time. 1972 was a long time ago.
Yes, it is. Deb, I think the most shocking thing that you said to me out of that statement was that I always considered Title IX something for colleges. But from what you're saying, is any type of educational, right, institution that gets federal money. So is that high school? Does that fall
If
down
they're
to
getting
high school?
if they're getting federal money, they don't generally take it as a high school because high schools don't usually get federal money, but you could, yeah, if you're receiving federal financial assistance, Title IX governs.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I never knew that till you said that. I mean, again, I just always associated it with colleges, and really not even JCs, junior colleges. I know it affects D1 and D2 and
Right.
D3, but JC, I didn't really realize that it would affect the junior college. I just didn't realize Title IX was that big and covered pretty much that many areas. But when you said
Yeah.
federal, that let me know.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a huge statute with not a lot of words that has so many implications. And then we've taken this statute and we've turned it into, to a large extent, for purposes of sports law, let's talk about it as a sports statute.
Right.
And there are 3 ways to comply, and this is what we see the NCAA dealing with all the time. One is that you offer proportionately equal opportunity. So if you have 50% men on campus and 50% women, you have to be within 5 percentage points of giving the men and the women equal opportunity to participate. And that's where we see a lot of things with programs getting cut. The second is going to be that you're continually expanding the program, which of course, well, you have this little thing called economics and money. And at some point, you just can't do that. And the third is that you've fully accommodated who was ever underrepresented. And it doesn't say men or women, it says the underrepresented sex. Wow. So you've got those things. So really what we talk about mostly is proportionality. And we have to give men and women on a campus the same opportunity. Well,
so
you're a football player.
No, go ahead.
I'm just saying you're a football player. So and how many guys? 85?
Yeah, 85 to 90 guys. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me which
so
women.
my question to you, Deb, will that open up lawsuits? Hey, I'm a senior at a small college. They decide I'm a female, and I'm a senior at a small college. The college decides to X the other sports out, not football, but X out the other sports because of COVID, whatever reason they want to do it. Does that senior, does she have anything legally to stand upon? Is it something that she can do about that can help her?
There are hundreds of lawsuits like that. Hundreds of lawsuits. Do
you think they'll get lumped into one big?
We've had those throughout the years. One of the big ones is Cohen versus Brown, where they were cutting the sports and they said, you can't cut these sports because you're not cutting the men's sports. And what they ultimately decided, and this is where Title IX gets really a little quirky, in a footnote in that Cohen v. Brown lawsuit, they said you can actually fix the Title IX problem by cutting men's sports too. Up until that time, there was always expansion and they weren't cutting the men's sports. Now, let's talk COVID for a minute. We're seeing these athletic departments, which they lose money generally.
Right.
But they're losing money and they're cutting sports. Stanford cut 11 varsity sports, including water polo, and volleyball. And Stanford was huge in water polo and volleyball.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen baseball cut. We've seen football programs cut. So.
And we know that's a trickle-down effect because, like you're saying, those high school seniors who are trying to get scholarships or who are competing to get the eyes of some of these recruiters, again, if you're talking about there's sports getting cut on the high school level, not from the standpoint of Title IX, but just with the COVID-19.
Right.
We're in the particular here in Michigan. It's kind of up in the air and kind of dicey, even though we're practicing right now. But we don't know. The governor, she could shut us down at any moment. And again, you got all these seniors. We have a quarterback on our team, very good kid. I think, if he is able to play this year, I definitely think he will get a scholarship, good size and everything. But I think a lot of it's depending on him being able to play this year, showcase his talent in his senior year to possibly be getting $140,000, $200,000 scholarship. Isn't that what they estimate? How much do they estimate a scholarship is worth there? Didn't they say
it's got to be close to 200? Yeah. I mean, a school's costing, $30,000 to $50,000 now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's big. So like you said, that it's just that trickle down effect, how it's going to affect those seniors in high school that are trying to get to the next level in college too.
Right. And then you've got like you said, it's that whole trickle down effect. And that's what, getting back to the women in sports, does this help or does this hurt women's sports?
That is a very, very good question, whether it's going to help or hurt it. Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I would think it's hurting everything else, Deb. I mean, why would it not hurt their sport? I mean, it seems like it's hurting everything else. Will the women have enough testing, enough money to do testing to make sure that nobody has the COVID and nobody affects any of the other teammates from women's sports? You got, like you say, we got the women coaches or coaches that are coaching these women's sports. Is there enough money to test all these? So Deb, I would have to say, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I would have to say that looks like that might hurt them to me than more so than help them.
Now I'm going to say a little different from a broadcast standpoint and from everything. The fact that we don't have some of these sports, it might actually be a good showcase for some of the women's sports. That we might be looking at some of these women's sports, especially some of the ones socially distant, if we have an abbreviated baseball season, an abbreviated football season, we don't know what's going to happen yet, or an abbreviated basketball season. Maybe, I mean, we're all watching Korean baseball, right?
Right. You're right. We are. I am. I know I get up watching. You're right.
So maybe this is a way to actually showcase how incredibly talented some of these women are.
Yeah. I got a question that I wanted to ask you. Elena Delalon, and I'm not saying the name right, but she plays in the WNBA.
Okay.
She has Lyme disease. She's been diagnosed since she's been a long time, had battles with Lyme disease. The WNBA denied her opt-out. She wanted to opt out the season. They denied her. Again, from a lawyer standpoint, what does she have anything to stand on? What can she do? Because she feels strongly. They don't know how this is going to affect her. But she's been diagnosed with Lyme disease, and she wanted to opt out of the season. But again, the WNBA didn't let her opt out. So, Deb, is there anything that Elena could do?
Wow, what a good question. I'm going to go back to the lawyer thing. I'd really have to look and see what the contract said and what the CBA says, and see what rights she has. I think we're really operating in unprecedented times right now, because normally you can't opt out. Normally, right. Regardless of whatever you have, you can't opt out, and that's kind of that's a brand new thing. And, you know, we've talked about insurance being part of it. But, you know, I don't think we know. And she's obviously somebody we want to see. We want to watch her. She's a big draw. So what,
Yeah.
you know, I
And
think
her
that
team just won the championship
Yeah.
last year. They're coming off the championship. Again, I know she's a big draw and
she is.
everything there, but here's someone that, you know, again, you talk about a disease like Lyme disease, and I'm not really sure about what Lyme disease. That's another question for Doc when we get Doc back on the phone, Dr. R back on. We can ask him, maybe he knows, but Deb, I would think that would be such a big risk for the Washington team to force her to try to play, knowing that she already has this disease, not knowing how she can be affected by this. Yes, she's one of the biggest names in the whole entire WNBA league. But
Right.
my goodness, could you imagine what would happen if something adverse happened to her because of this COVID and because she had to go out there or she couldn't opt out?
Well, you know, and that's a question we've asked. I mean, that's a great question, because I'm going to say that at some point, somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to be seriously disabled because of this. With so many athletes and so many underlying conditions with the athletes, I just don't see that that's not going to happen. So the opt-out is one way to say we're assuming the risk, we're not assuming the risk. And then you have something like this where you're saying, well, you can't opt out. We need you.
But Deb, I just don't agree with that. I mean, I'm looking at it as they know she's okay. When we talk about underlying health problems, that means a lot of people don't even know they have the health problem, right?
Right.
Right. So, but she knows it. She's letting them know that she has an underlying, that she has a health problem. And you're telling me because of who she is that you're going to force her to play, and she doesn't have any repercussions. Again, she's laying it out that I have Lyme disease. It's not like somebody that doesn't know they have an underlying health problem. Therefore, a team is operating out of not knowing rather than knowing, because she has put it out there and she's married. Her wife is concerned about the same thing. So
Sure.
I'm just, I just don't understand the thinking. Even if I got it in a clause, even if this is an unprecedented time in the world today, I'm a caution on the side of, I'm a err on the side of caution more than I am. Well, I guess it's easier for me to say it.
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess you're right. Yeah.
I think what's happening there is that the league is trying to balance, do we lose a big name at this point in time? And what can we do to force her to play? And, you know, it's like anybody with an underlying health condition, you've just got to make a decision at some point. Are you going to continue to play?
Yeah.
And that's a tough question, tough question. And I'd really, I'd love to look at the case.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. Title IX is about equal opportunity. Lomas made a great point about funding and testing available during this time. Is there equal funding under Title IX? Does funding have an impact on the opportunities available? Well,
great question.
I'm going to say absolutely funding. It's all about funding at this point. You've been a college athlete and working with these athletes. What do you think about that and funding and?
Oh yeah, it's definitely, Deb. I mean, I look at, again, you see a number of the HBCU colleges. They're not going to compete this year because of funding. They know they don't have the funding to be able to test the necessary athletes that they have, to be able to socially distance these guys out in locker rooms, the travel arrangements. It's a lot of things have to be done differently, along with the support staff and the staff that you have in the office to make sure that your football program is running right. You see a lot of these D1 and these D2 and D3 schools that were scheduled to play bigger schools that lost that opportunity. Now, these guys are losing $500,000 to millions of dollars that's being taken out of their budget because they won't be able, or possibly won't be able, to play these games because a lot of the leagues are just playing conference games now. So,
right.
Again, but with the funding, that's a great question, because the funding has to spread equal. I think it has to. I think they got different thresholds of where they expect the funding to be funded at. But again, I think across the line, a lot of these colleges, I even listened to the University of Florida, a lot of them saying they're going to have to take cuts across the line. So we'll see if these will be equal cuts. That's the key, if they're going to be equal cuts across the line.
Well, yeah. And, and that's where we start talking about the women's sports and the men's sports and how COVID affects it all. Because if a smaller school loses 25%, 50% of its budget because they're not playing the big game against Michigan or Michigan State, because they play these games. I mean, they play the games to get the money for the school. And then that money,
right.
Obviously, here's a Missouri, Wyoming, and, sometimes a smaller school wins. But I always go back to that state. I'm so sorry. I keep doing that. Sorry, Michigan fans. But, they're cutting the funding. They're cutting the entire athletic department. So how can we continue to support? Because we know, and that's something we haven't said in this broadcast, but we've said it a few other times, men's football, men's basketball, that's where the money is. If you don't have men's football or men's basketball, you don't make money. Having an athletic department, everything else held equal. So that takes away from all the women's sports and from everything else.
Yeah, this
huge
it's
problem.
Not right. It really is a problem, and Deb, I don't see it as a problem that's going away anytime soon. I mean, because I don't see this crisis going away anytime soon. I think some of the schools talking about starting off with maybe 25% of the fans in there. You got some schools saying they're not going to have any fans coming to the game right now. That's their decision right now. So again, everything's going to be affected from the standpoint of concession, parking, just all the money that's really generated on a game day is going to be severely cut. So a lot of schools, a lot of people are going to have to make a lot of decisions, including some of those coaches that we talked about that making some of these big salaries. There was an article on that about the coaches that haven't taken cuts yet compared to some of the coaches that have, and it's some big numbers. So you see it's affecting every individual part of a football team. The COVID is just, it's something else there, something else.
Well, it's, and to build on that a little bit, it's not only affecting the football team, but if you take that budget away from the school, and that football team was supporting the, I'm going to say the men's golf team or the wrestling team or the women's softball team or any of those others, you've really taken away the financial support. I was reading earlier that UConn was getting rid of it. I believe it's rowing team, and rowing is usually where we have a lot of women, which gives the proportionality test for the men's football, because you can put a lot of women on a rowing team. Women's sports just generally don't have as many bodies as men's sports do. Once you have a football program. So it's an interesting question, how that's all going to shake out, what sports are going to be cut. And going back, I think we're going to see, we are going to see both men's and women's sports being cut. And
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you this. Is this a new problem? Or do you think that this is exposing an existing problem? Because we've seen sports cuts
Great
for years.
question. Yeah, I think this is an existing problem that's, like you say, it's been going on for years. I think they try to find a balance, a sweet balance. And of course, Deb, it's driven by the almighty dollar. If a sports program isn't making money for you and yet and still it's costing you money to keep that program, that's a program that might not be around for a while. You look at, like you were saying, you look at some of these schools. Let's take a school like Connecticut, where actually the money comes from, I would say, women's basketball. Way more than football, you know what I'm saying? Because that's what Connecticut is known for, their women's basketball team.
And that's a definite outlier. Yeah,
absolutely. But look at other schools. You look at Kentucky. I think their basketball team drives, the men's basketball team.
Right.
I think it drives sports just as much as their football team.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say maybe not more, but I would say it's just as big. And I've heard some guys say it's actually bigger than football in Kentucky. So again, you have some women's sports that I think that really identifies the schools right now, because some of the men's sports are struggling or aren't doing as well as they should be doing. So, I think it's just been a fine balance of what's making you money, what's drawing the fans, and what's not drawing the fans that we figured that we could get rid of.
So I'm going to ask you, I put you on the spot a little bit here. Football stadiums are a lot bigger than basketball stadiums. And if we're talking about, you had brought up game day revenues. Even if the school may be known for it, maybe we're picking up some on broadcast, but from an NCAA standpoint, you're making a lot more money on that game day, on those concessions, on those ticket sales, on the merchandise, all of that. Can football and basketball ever be equal in terms of revenue generation? I don't know the answer. That's why I asked you.
Damn, how could it though? Because you gave me the sure numbers. Like you say, let's look at Michigan, right? They hold over 100,000 at the big house. I think with the basketball team, maybe 20,000 in the basketball team. Now they're only talking about allowing 20,000 fans, 25,000 fans to come to Michigan Stadium for a football game. So I'm quite sure they're going to reduce that number for the amount that could come to a basketball game too, right? They won't allow 20,000.
Social distancing. If we're going to do that, we have to. We still have 6 feet apart.
Right. So I don't know how. I just don't see how basketball would be able to catch up and compete with football. If I just looked at the sheer numbers standpoint. But if you were that devil on that little shoulder right here, you could be like Lomas. But you got a lot more football players that you have to take care of, a lot more equipment, a lot more moving around of people than you do with basketball. So yeah, I could be like, yeah, Deb, you're right. So it's funny to see how that will balance out. And you might be right. Basketball might out because of all the expenses that it takes to run, especially insurance, Deb. I keep hearing that's one of the hugest costs of a football team, if you can get insured, is the liability insurance that you have to cover the team with. I heard that's stopping a lot of programs from continuing football because of the insurance costs.
Yeah, I think. I think we should do an entire sports law on insurance. I really think we should do a whole episode on insurance. So we're running out of time. So I have 2 more questions for you. One is being asked here, education makes such a point to teach students various laws that have been amended, women's suffrage, prohibition, etc. in your opinion, should Title IX be taught more in schools? Would it make a difference in participation in sports at the higher level?
Oh, Deb, go ahead. You start that one, Deb. I like that. I like that question.
Yeah, well, I think it's always a good idea to teach Title IX. I think it's always a good idea that people should understand the opportunities that they have. And this goes to the systemic racism we have. Curriculums, when we're looking at schools, we really, really need to look at teaching more than what we have been teaching. I'm going to attempt to be politically correct here, but we really have to identify the fact that there is women's suffrage. There's been systemic racism. There's, the slavery. There's everything, and we're not teaching really American history. I'm
You're right.
going to say that we're not teaching American history, and I know that a lot of the schools, especially recently, have looked at changing their curriculums, and they're working very hard to change their curriculums, and I think that's good, and I think it should be a total look at the curriculums. It's happening with that, because there's so much going on there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
To me, Deb, no, education is the key, right? I mean, if you don't know, I mean, you don't know. So to me, women should know about Title IX. They should be taught about Title IX in high school, maybe even before high school. They should know the advantages that Title IX helps with them, and it helps them. And I think it would help with recruiting, getting females more interested in sports, in the sports industry, period. You don't have to go into sports or be an athlete. It's so much around the sports industry that women and guys can participate in without being athletes. So to me, I think the education is important. It really is. You got to get the information out there so people can make a sound decision on what they want to do.
And know that they have the opportunity. Know that they have the opportunity. Exactly. That anybody, you and I, could both have grown up to be president.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Final question that I have for you. The Rooney Rule. If we had the Rooney Rule for women in sports, and the Rooney Rule says that you have to any NFL team looking for a head coach has to interview an ethnic minority. And if we had that for women, do you think that it would change the number of women that we had in coaching?
Yes, I do, Deb. And the reason why I do think that is because then you would have more women in the pipelines coming up. You would have, and that's the biggest problem with the Rooney Rule in the NFL. You don't have enough assistant coaches coming up through the pipelines. You don't have enough offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators, special teams coordinators of color coming up through the pipeline. And I think that's what the Rooney Rule would do. Because again, if you know, Deb, to me, if you went into an industry where you know you didn't have an opportunity, you knew you going into this, if I walk into this door, I know I'm not going to have an opportunity to do anything. 9 out of 10, you might not go through that door. And a lot of times, I think that's what happens to a lot of candidates. I think they get in their mind that they know, well, man, I don't have an opportunity. I'm not going to, they're not going to. And a lot of times they don't put themselves in position or put themselves out there to where they can get an opportunity to get interviewed. And I think because they're beaten down at a certain level where you're told you're not going to be able to do this. So they don't want women as coaches and, just all the things that they say. And I think that stops the pipeline. It kind of stops up the pipeline and doesn't let it flow up. So I think with the Rooney Rule, I think you'll really get more females in the pipeline, more opportunities, more choices to pick from.
Well, hopefully that will happen with the Rooney Rule and how it plays in football, which is a whole other discussion too, because you get that to see if that's actually working. Does it work? So I'm being told that we have 1 minute left.
Uh-oh. Is that from our producer extraordinaire?
Our producer extraordinaire. Yep, he's telling us we have 1 minute left. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and we can talk about the Rooney Rule.
Maybe we should spend this minute. Yeah, maybe we should have spent this minute talking about how our producer went out on the waterways and got tan.
Yeah,
you know, everybody, he's looking all bronzed and everything now.
Oh yeah, out sailing 3 or 4 day race.
Look at him.
Yep. Yeah, and live to tell about it. The Mackinac race. Good job. Good job. We're very proud of it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
good job, Ray. Absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up here, and I want to thank Allie for all of her great questions. Really wonderful thing. Of course, she knows a lot about Title IX, and she is our high school coach, high school coach that we interviewed a few weeks ago here.
Yes.
And, look at it, check us out on sportslaw.com, check us out on Facebook, send in some questions. We'd love to answer some of your questions. If you have an idea for a podcast, let us know. We'd love to answer that. And we're also on SoundCloud. So thank you.